My name is Dr. Jason Marshall. I run the surface cleaning laboratory at the Toxic Use Reduction Institute at UMASS Lowell. And what we do here is we do performance testing of cleaning products. We show how safe they are and how well they work under different situations. So we work with companies who are looking to have their products certified by a third party like Green Seal or EPA Safer Choice. And we do a lot of the performance testing that companies do for that kind of certification process. So what we're going to move into now is to look at how the operational activities in a building, such as cleaning and pest management and moisture control, all relate to air quality and the environmental health. So we're going to, first of all, talk about something that nobody ever likes to talk about, but everybody has to do it. It's called cleaning. You know, people never really want to bring it up and talk about it. And so when you move in, building a new facility, and you want to basically maintain that building the way it is, no one really thinks about how you go about doing that in a safe and effective way. So it's important to come at the beginning design stages to look at that and make sure that you're doing things that can be designed to be cleaned and maintained without adding to the issues of health and impacts like that. We just recently moved from a building where our lab was cramped and pretty well stuck in everywhere we could find space. We had 25 students working in maybe 1,500 square feet. I luckily moved into a new place where it's about 3,000 square feet, where we have new facilities, new floors, new cabinets, new windows. And it's one of those things that we're going to be maintaining as well, is how well is this building going to be kept up and make sure that we're not exposing anybody to chemicals that they don't want to be exposed to for health effects. And so why is maintenance important to creating a healthier building? Well, first of all, an easiest way to explain that is dirt attracts insects, vermin, and other irritants, which will then allow you to decrease your productivity because you're not coming to work, because you're not feeling well. So it's important to be able to eliminate those types of things and reduce your impact on respiratory issues as well as asthma. And so that's one of the things that you need to look at is cleaning removes that and makes it easier for you to maintain a healthy workplace for those who are working in there. So everyday maintenance of your facility will help things run smoothly and safely. So the question is, how do these cleaning and pest management and moisture control relate to indoor air quality and environmental health? Well, I mentioned with cleaning, if you don't clean, you're going to have dirt accumulating, which just attracts in different types of pests and unwanted things. But sadly, even if you do cleaning, you can also contribute to poor indoor air quality by using either too much of a chemical or the wrong chemical or an unsafe chemical. So when it comes to cleaning, you have to make sure that you're selecting something that's safer. Also, when you have to there are times where you cannot get away from using something that's nasty. For disinfection is one of those things the chemicals are designed to kill. And so there's going to be health effects associated with those types of chemicals. So in those situations where you can't get away from a hazardous material, it's best to be able to perform those operations when the building is unoccupied or has a lower staff number in the building so that you're exposing the least amount of people that you have to. And you also want to make sure that these products that you are using, those people who are using them correctly. So training is very important on how to use these chemicals and also when to use these chemicals. It's also, you want to make sure that people who are not trained on these are not able to get to these chemicals, and for a spot cleaning type of thing, they don't want to go in and grab something and think this is the greatest thing in the world. Go ahead and use it. It's in the building. It must be safe. Those are the things that cause people to get exposed to chemicals in a way that they shouldn't be. So some examples of the chemicals that you may come in contact with would be floor strippers or floor coating materials, also disinfecting chemicals, or even toilet bowl cleaners and all-purpose cleaners. These different applications, you don't have one product that's designed for all of the uses that you're looking at, because soils are different and they'll need different types of chemicals to remove different types of soils. That's why you have so many products to choose from that are out there. And so it's important for people who are going to be using these to know when and where to use these types of chemicals. It's not just take something off the shelf and it'll work for everything. There isn't one that does that. If there was, I'd be out of a job not doing anything. But so it's important to identify what you're trying to clean and then what chemicals should be appropriate for that. So you wouldn't use a toilet bowl cleaner on a marble surface because the acid nature of the cleaning chemical would eat away at the marble and you destroy your countertop. So it's important for you to do certain things like that. Again, if you're using aerosol sprays versus, a manual pump type of spray, your delivery amounts are going to be different and your exposure patterns are going to be different. And so it's important to know when and where to spray or not to spray. And if you spray it onto the surface, you spray it onto a cloth and then wipe the surface. These are all parts of the training process that you can go through to develop a safer practice for these types of cleaning situations. It's also important to, use other things besides cleaning chemicals. There are things you can use that can help reduce the amount of dust and allergens that are thrown around. If you use a broom, you're normally going to sweep things around and just kind of stir them up into the air. Where if you're using a high efficiency vacuum, we have HEPA filters that will capture all those fine particles and remove that from the air and reduce the exposure to those types of allergens and dust mites and things like that. So you can also use walk-off mats in front of the building that removes a ton of the soil before it gets tracked into the facility. Those simple little things, how you lay it out, what you're designing to use, will help make the process, cleaning everything else, easier down the road. Again, doing walkthroughs of the kitchen areas and cafeteria food areas, make sure there's no crumbs left. There's a way to remove all these things easily. Extra clutter, like paper and toys and stuff like that, are all areas where dust and allergens can collect. Make sure that you're not giving a place for the stuff to hide and then being re-exposed and contaminating things as you go along. So in addition to being able to make sure that people are trained, it's, you have to understand how to determine if something is safer. And the chemicals that you would buy would have a safety data sheet available for you to basically describe what the hazards are associated with those chemicals, with what not to use it with, what to avoid it with, what your hazards would be, as well as for the environment. In addition to the safety data sheets, they also will provide technical data sheets, which will allow you to figure out how to use these, or what concentrations, what types of applications, what to avoid. So it's important to anybody who is going to be using these to be familiar with how to read a safety data sheet and how that applies to the chemicals that you're using. What you also want to do is, from time to time, do an inventory of what you have in-house, meaning what you're currently using and how you're using it, and figuring out if those chemicals are still being used 6 months from now, or at the end of the year, to say, did we use any of these things? Should we get rid of them? And then if you're not using them, figure out, do you need something else to replace it? Why weren't you using it? So it's a way to basically develop a way to weed out the things that you're not using and what you should be looking at other alternatives for. So another way to control the exposure of, the control of allergens and dust and vermin and stuff like that is make sure your garbage actually is stored in appropriate containers. Make sure it's not stored, in a central area where everyone's going to be walking by it. Put it off, out of the way. Make sure it has a cover to it. It's emptied daily if it has food waste and things like that in it. It's all food for not, if you're not going to eat it, something else is going to. So it's good to get rid of that and make sure it's disposed of properly. So that goes along with, doing the walk through the kitchen, make sure everything is, and anywhere else people are having food. One of the issues you may come across is that, people like to eat in their offices where you didn't really design the floor to be able to be cleaned easy enough for someone, on carpeting or something like that. So it's good to maybe restrict people being able to eat certain areas so that the building can be maintained easier. But that's something that you kind of work out with the building occupants while you're doing this type of application. So moving on from the cleaning aspect to pest management, there's a methodology that's out there. It's called integrated pest management. It's not my area of expertise, but I've been exposed to it and worked with people around this topic to be able to kind of describe what it is. It's a way to problem solve, landscaping and building design in order to be able to prevent and control undesirables, such as weeds and insects and fungi and different types of rodents. It's important to realize that even though it's a systematic way of doing it, there isn't one tool that should fit anybody. It's a site-specific process. And you have to look at the environmental conditions I mentioned before about the human side of things, how people are using the facility and what they're using it for, talking with those types of people to decide what makes most sense. Do they need more break rooms for them to be able to eat their snacks so they're not eating in their offices, carpet floor? Is it, does the trash need to be taken out every day? Do we have to go around the building and look for holes in the walls? So it's definitely looking at your site-specific application. So you also have to look at what you're trying to eliminate, the pest biology, how you're going to be able to get rid of it. Is it a microbe? Is it an insect? Is it a small cat? You never know. You want to basically figure out what it is and how you're going to get rid of it. So through this, you can prevent and resist pests that interfere with the purpose and use of this site. So moving on to moisture control and how that impacts indoor air quality and the environmental health. Moisture is key to controlling mold. Keeping the building dry is essential for maintaining a healthy building. The presence of the moisture in the building stimulates growth of molds and other biological contaminants. It also provides a source for the mites and roaches to reproduce and to live off of. So it's in addition to the mold that may grow, but the actual rodents and mites and things like that can lead to increased asthma and allergy types of exposure and incidences because of the nature of what they are and what they carry on their bodies. So the moisture will bring mold. It also will bring rodents and mites. All that together kind of impacts the air quality of your building. So it's important to control moisture where you are. In addition to the physical interactions with the occupants, the building can also be damaged by the moisture that's in there. It can cost a lot of money to renovate these types of issues, not only just removing the mold, but also replacing the walls themselves with the flooring and the carpeting and stuff. So it's important to look ahead as to where you have water sources and how to prevent that from causing damage to the work environment. The challenging part of switching from one process or one chemical to another is to make sure that you're not introducing new hazards where you are trying to eliminate something. So the important part is to not shift risk from the worker exposure or the occupant exposure to building or indoor air quality changes. So it's a balancing act of reducing the hazards that that are there versus what you may be bringing in by switching to something new. So how do you do that? It's challenging. That's why we're here doing what we're doing. What you want to do, first of all, is you want to reduce the amount of hazards that you're, at least from the chemical side of things, what you're using for chemicals, reduce the known hazards of those. And like I said, you don't want to shift the risk from, say, it's a skin irritant to a flammable substance where you're trying to avoid damaging yourself versus burning down the building. So that's one of those things you have to decide what risk is more easily contained or controlled, and which one can you reduce quicker or easier based on what you're looking at. Now, one of the things that we always say is you want to shift from something hazardous to something safer. I didn't say to something safe. Everything has a hazard associated with it. So what you want to do is you want to find something that's not as bad and still do the job that you want it to do. And so the question is, well, how do you go about doing that? Well, there are tools that are out there that will help you to compare your current solvent or current chemical or current process to something else. What we use at Turi is a tool we developed here. It's called the Pollution Prevention Options Analysis System. For short, we call it peatoasiscom. And I could spend 3 to 6 months telling you all about that. But what it does is it's a way for you to use the safety data sheet and the technical data sheet and your expert judgment to go through your current process as well as the new process and picking off various endpoints for different hazards and different exposures that you may encounter with each of these two processes. Bases the final scoring on endpoints that are put out there by Global Harmonization System, which is a way to it's what safety data sheets are made from. They use these endpoints. And so we can use these endpoints to decide which type of chemical is potentially safer or more hazardous than another. In the end, the peatoasiscom score isn't meant to say, if you get a score of 6.2, that's bad. It's meant to say you have one product that has a 6.2 and one has an 8.2, you know that the 6.2 is safer than the 8.2. So it's a relative comparison, but it gives you an idea to kind of compare the same kind of endpoints while you're going through this process. So the peatoasiscom system originally was believe it or not, an Excel download sheet from Excel 95. So this past year or so, we put in a lot of effort to make it, into this century, and we've actually made it so that you can use it online to do this type of analysis, and it's free for anybody to use. You go to peatoasiscom.turi.org, and you basically go through the process of identifying the chemical that you want. You can use the safety data sheets and enter them in as you go. If anybody has any questions while they're trying to use this, feel free to send me an email and ask me for help. I didn't invent it, but I made it to where it is now, so that I hate to say it, the expert on it, but I'm the one that knows the most about it at this point, so feel free to contact me with any questions while you're doing the comparison. So you may be asking yourself, are there established protocols that are out there for making healthier cleaning and pest management and mold and moisture control easier for you to do? And the simple answer is yes, they do exist. But again, I go back to what I had said earlier, that even though there may be something out there that exists and you can use, you have to make sure you tailor it to your specific needs. It's not going to be a cookie cutter type of thing where you say, here it is, add in your information and out comes an answer. You definitely have to go through all these things and make sure they're relevant to your process. One of the things you can do to help make your selection of a cleaning chemistry or even the disinfectant chemicals or pest control stuff is to look into various options that your state or local or regional area may have put together. I know in Massachusetts, we have a Operational Service Division, OSD, that has done a environmentally preferable purchasing policy, EPP, then on and on and on. But what they have done is they've done a lot of the legwork for you at identifying what the endpoints are that are relevant for a safer process or a product, and put that all into one place where they've gone through, they've gotten pricing, they've said that it works, and it's also greener than what's out there for traditional products. So these state procurement offices are a good place to start. I know in Massachusetts, they have it up on their website and anybody can look at it. You may not necessarily get the same prices that they have, but you can see what's out there for options for you to use. So it's a good place to start. They've done a lot of the legwork for you. Same thing for preventing moisture and mold. It's conducting the moisture inspections, ensuring that the building is free of moisture problems, water damage, do the visual inspections, fix any leaks. It's like common sense type of thing. You kind of do a walkthrough. Is there water here? Why is it here? Am I using it? Can I avoid it? If something does get wet, go through and you clean it up, you dry it out, and you figure out how did this happen, how can we prevent that from happening before. Little things like don't put in carpeting where you have a sink or pipes that will be coming through. So if something does break, you're not going to have it soaking into the carpet and then having it dealing with the moisture that way. Again, on the exterior of the building, make sure your gutters are cleaned out, the downspouts aren't obstructed, your storm drains aren't plugged. It's just all those little things that can build up to be able to prevent this moisture from being trapped near the building or in the building. From a chemical side of things, again, creating a team is a good way to do it, and it's obviously what this whole thing is all about. It's working with people. And one of the things that we have learned over the years is that you create a team, a diverse team, with people from purchasing to the people who are actually using it and the people who are disposing of it. And also you want to include, if you're in a mixed residential, commercial type of facility, people who aren't necessarily going to be in the same room as it, but be exposed to the same air that's being, maybe contaminated with different chemicals. Find out what's important to all your actors in your selection process or your building that you're looking at, and getting input from all of them up front versus having to put out fires down the road is very important for a safe adoption of these types of processes. If you just come to someone saying, this is what we've come up with, you have to go do this, they're going to basically say, yep, see you later, and they're going to go back to what they were doing before. They're not going to have that buy-in that you need. So it's important to bring them in up front, listen to them, get their input, work together as a team to create a process or a project to be able to go forward and use what you've put together in a systematic way. Like I said, you just can't dump it on people and expect them to love it. But if they have felt like they had input into the process, they're going to welcome it with open arms versus closing the door in your face. So the other thing you can also do is, I had mentioned earlier about doing a chemical inventory. This is meant to be an iterative process. You're not going to get it right the first time through. What you want to do is you create your process. You got to start somewhere. So at the end of a set period of time, either 6 months or a year, you go back and you look at the chemicals and the processes that you chose to use. Then you want to go through an assessment. Did they work? Did they cost too much? Were there problems? with exposure to the air after you switch to something that you thought was safer? And if you're not using these chemicals anymore, how do you get rid of them properly? And how do you switch to something new? So it's important to not just assume that you have a plan in place and that's it, you walk away from it and never look at it again. It's meant to be a living document where you come back and you change it as you go. So in conclusion, or wrapping up this whole session, it's important to remember that you put a lot of effort into when you're designing a building, and the materials that you're using and how you're going to be using them. It's as important to think about how the chemicals that you're going to be using in this building in the same kind of manner. Going through and assessing them for what it's supposed to be used for, how it's supposed to be used, and what are the hazards associated with it, how people should be trained on how to use these things. They're all important things to go through. It's not something, like I said at the beginning, nobody wants to talk about it. Well, guess what? You guys need to talk about it and figure out before you start and how you're going to use this, what chemicals are going to be the safest one for you to use in this process. It's also not just chemicals, it's also processes. If you have a wet area, make sure you clean that up, dry it up within 24 to 48 hours, because what this will do is eliminates the potential area for mold to begin in the dust mites and all the vermin coming in and living off of this wet area. So it's important to be proactive in your approach. Remember that every location that you deal with is not going to be identical. Even if there's similar buildings, the different people are going to be occupying these things, and they're going to have different practices and different wants and different desires. So each location is going to be, can be similar, but it's not going to be the exact same thing. You shouldn't just blindly adopt something without going through and creating this team of people to go through the process of what chemicals to use for cleaning, as well as pest control and avoiding moisture issues. Like I said, a diverse team will help you cover different areas, different viewpoints. It's a collaborative effort, and it's definitely not something that you do it once and you're done with. It's an iterative process. You go back through, you revisit things from time to time. Sadly, most times people will go back and revisit these things when something bad happens. What you wanted to be able to do is be in a mindset of, let's review this after a set period of time before something bad happens to make sure that we're not going to get complacent and forget about something or use something the wrong way, that we've hired somebody new and they haven't been trained on how to use it. It's all those types of things that you want to go through and make sure you revisit from time to time. When you have staff changeover, that's a good time to get together a new committee member and say, this is what we've done, this is how we're going to do it. What is your viewpoint? What do you bring to the table? What have you seen in the past? So I just want to end with, you're not going to get it right the first time. And that's okay. As long as you continue to improve and change the process as you go through, things will be moving towards the right direction. You're going to be going in a safer direction. It's not going to be safe, but it'll be safer.